In October 1870, a cluster of 5 spiritualist families took up residence in the vicinity of Osage Township, situated in the northwestern region of Labette County. This area was approximately 7 miles northeast of the soon-to-be-established Cherryvale, which would come into existence 7 months later. Among these families, the Bender family, comprising John Bender and John Bender Jr., secured ownership of 160 acres of land that lay adjacent to the Great Osage Trail, the primary route for westward travel during that era. With the completion of a cabin, a barn accompanied by a corral, and a well, the stage was set for Elvira Bender and her daughter Kate to join the settlement in the autumn of 1871. The Bender family ingeniously divided their cabin into 2 distinct rooms, employing a canvas wagon cover. The smaller of these rooms was situated at the rear, designated for their living quarters. Meanwhile, the front room was repurposed as a sort of general store, where a variety of dry goods were made available for purchase. This front section of the cabin also functioned as the kitchen, complete with a dining table. This arrangement allowed travelers to pause for a meal or find lodging for the night. As an additional endeavor, Elvira and Kate cultivated a 2-acre plot of land to the north of the cabin, where they planted a vegetable garden and nurtured an apple orchard. John Bender Sr., aged around 60, possessed a limited command of the English language, and his speech, when employed, often took on a guttural and frequently unintelligible quality. According to the May 23, 1873 edition of the Emporia News, he was associated with the name William Bender. At 55 years old, Elvira Bender was characterized as having scant proficiency in English. Her demeanor was reputedly so inhospitable that her neighbors dubbed her she-devil. In contrast, John Bender Jr., approximately 25 years of age, exhibited a handsome visage with auburn hair and a well-maintained mustache. His fluency in English was accentuated by a discernible German inflection. His inclination to engage in bouts of seemingly purposeless laughter led many to perceive him as somewhat simple-minded. Kate Bender, around 23 years old, presented an air of refinement and allure. Her mastery of the English language was marked by minimal accent. Self-proclaimed as a healer and psychic, she actively distributed leaflets touting her supernatural abilities and her aptitude for remedying ailments. Additionally, she conducted seances and delivered lectures on spiritualism, which contributed to her notoriety for advocating the concept of free love. Kate's popularity served as a significant draw for the Benders in. While the elder Benders maintained a reserved stance, Kate and her brother regularly attended Sunday school sessions in the nearby Harmony Grove. The Benders were widely believed to be of German immigrant origin. However, conclusive documentation or evidence confirming their familial ties or birthplaces has eluded discovery. John Bender Sr., hailing from either Germany, Norway, or the Netherlands, may have originally been known as John Flickinger. As per reports from contemporaneous newspapers, Elvira, born Elmira Hillmark in the Adirondack Mountains, entered into matrimony with Simon Mark, with whom she claimed to have parented 12 children. Subsequently, she wedded William Stephen Griffith. Although rumors circulated that Elvira was responsible for the demise of several husbands, none of these allegations were substantiated. Kate was purportedly the 5th daughter of Elvira. Some neighbors of the Benders contended that John and Kate were not siblings, but rather husband and wife. In the month of May in the year 1871, the lifeless form of an individual named Jones came to light within Drum Creek's confines, bearing grievous wounds, a throat slit and skull brutally crushed. While the proprietor of the Drum Creek claim fell under suspicion, no tangible measures were undertaken. As the calendar flipped to February 1872, the remains of 2 men were uncovered, mirroring the same telltale injuries suffered by Jones. As the year 1873 dawned, accounts of individuals who had ventured through the vicinity and then vanished grew alarmingly frequent, prompting travelers to actively circumvent this trail to evade potential danger. Already infamous for harboring horse thieves and malefactors, the region's reputation was far from pristine. Vigilance committees took it upon themselves to apprehend certain figures linked to these disappearances, albeit often without legal authority. Regrettably, these captives would eventually find themselves set free by legitimate authorities. Such committees contributed to the expulsion of numerous innocent men from the county, casting a shadow of suspicion upon them without due cause. During the winter of 1872, George Newton Lonker embarked from Independence, Kansas, accompanied by his infant daughter Marianne, to resettle in Iowa. Tragically, their traces vanished, and they were never glimpsed again. When spring emerged in 1873, Dr. William Henry York, once a neighbor of Lonker, commenced a quest to uncover their whereabouts. He embarked on a journey, questioning homesteaders who occupied the trail. His route led him to Fort Scott, from where he intended to return to Independence on March 9. Regrettably, this journey culminated in his disappearance. Within this backdrop, Dr. York had two brothers, Ed York, a resident of Fort Scott, and Colonel Alexander M. York, a Civil War veteran, lawyer, and a member of the Kansas State Senate hailing from Independence. Both were aware of William's planned journey, and when he failed to return, an extensive search for the missing doctor was set in motion. Colonel York took the lead, marshalling around 50 individuals to undertake a comprehensive investigation. They scrutinized every traveler traversing the trail and conducted inquiries across the surrounding homesteads. March 28, 1873, marked Colonel York's arrival at the Benders Inn, accompanied by Mr. Johnson. He beseeched the Benders for any information regarding his vanished brother. The Benders acknowledged Dr. York's stay, but theorized he might have encountered difficulties involving Indians. Colonel York considered this plausible and remained at the inn for a meal. However, tensions escalated when, on April 3, Colonel York returned to the inn with armed men. Reports indicated that a woman had fled the inn following threats from Elvira Bender, who wielded knives. This incident raised suspicions, casting doubt on the Benders' innocence. Elvira's purported inability to understand English was challenged, as her language proficiency appeared more advanced than previously indicated. During this period, neighboring communities began to accuse the Osage community of involvement in the disappearances. As a response, a meeting took place in the Harmony Grove schoolhouse, where 75 locals convened. This assembly included Colonel York and both John Bender and John Bender Jr. The discussion centered on the mysterious vanishings, including that of William York. A consensus was reached to secure a warrant for the systematic search of homesteads spanning between Big Hill Creek and Drum Creek. Despite the mounting suspicions surrounding the Benders since Colonel York's earlier visit, their actions went largely unobserved. It wasn't until days later, prompted by Billy Toll's observation of the abandoned Bender property, that the community began to investigate their absence. A search party, numbering several hundred, was organized, led by Colonel York. Upon reaching the inn, they encountered a deserted cabin stripped of provisions, clothing, and personal effects. An unsettling odor led the party to a trapdoor beneath a bed, which was sealed shut. Upon opening it, they discovered clotted blood in the room below. Despite their efforts, no bodies were located under the cabin's stone slab floor. An extensive probing exercise ensued, with a metal rod utilized to investigate the garden and orchard areas. Dr. York's remains were eventually unearthed, buried face down in the vegetable garden. Additional probing ensued, leading to the discovery of more bodies and body parts. The atmosphere surrounding the discovery became heated. It was reported that one of the Benders' acquaintances, Brockman, was hung from a beam in the inn before being released in a state of distress. As investigations unfolded, a Roman Catholic prayer book with German inscriptions was found, offering cryptic clues about the Bender family. News of the gruesome murders rapidly spread, drawing the attention of thousands, including reporters from distant cities. The Bender cabin, however, fell victim to souvenir hunters who dismantled it entirely, leaving no trace behind. State Senator Alexander York offered a $1,000 reward for the apprehension of the family, followed by Kansas Governor Thomas A. Osborne's offer of a $2,000 reward for the capture of all four Benders. There is speculation, the source of which is not definitively identified, that a chilling method was employed at the Benders' bed and breakfast inn. The narrative goes that when a guest arrived, they would be assigned a place of distinction at the dining table, strategically positioned above a concealed cellar trapdoor. In this arrangement, as the guest faced the curtain, Kate would engage them in conversation, serving as a distraction. At this juncture, John Bender or his son would stealthily emerge from behind the curtain, delivering a fatal blow to the right side of the guest's skull with a hammer. One of the women in the family would then ensure the victim's demise by cutting their throat. Subsequently, the lifeless body would be lowered through the trapdoor into the cellar. Down below, the body would be disrobed and ultimately interred somewhere on the property, often within the orchard. While certain victims were affluent, others held meager possessions, raising suspicions that the Benders might have taken their lives purely for the thrill of it. This sinister conjecture is reinforced by accounts from those who managed to escape the clutches of the Benders. William Pickering recounted how Kate Bender threatened him with a knife when he refused to sit near a cloth stained with suspicious marks, prompting his hasty retreat. Another narrative comes from a Catholic priest who reported witnessing one of the Bender men concealing a large hammer, causing his discomfort and prompting him to quickly depart the premises. An intriguing incident involves two men who visited the inn with the intention of experiencing Kate Bender's supposed psychic abilities. Opting not to sit near the cloth-covered table, they instead chose to dine at the primary shop counter. Their decision to distance themselves from the table proved providential, as Kate's hostile behavior prompted their early departure, likely saving their lives. The dwelling itself bore the scars of potential resistance, with over a dozen bullet holes discovered in its roof and sides. Speculation abounded that some victims might have endeavored to fight back after enduring the initial hammer strike. Following the tracks left by wagons, detectives stumbled upon the forsaken wagon belonging to the Benders, positioned just beyond Thayer's city boundaries. The horses attached to the wagon were in a dire state of malnutrition, with one of the mares being lame. This site lay 12 miles north of the Benders Inn. Subsequently, it was confirmed that the family had secured tickets on the Leavenworth, Lawrence, and Galveston Railroad bound for Humboldt. John Jr. and Kate disembarked from the train at Chanute, opting to catch the MKNT train heading south to the terminal located in Red River County, close to Denison, Texas. From this juncture, their path led to a region assumed to be an outlaw settlement straddling the Texas-New Mexico border. Law enforcement refrained from pursuing them further, as the area was notorious for entrapping and vanquishing lawmen trailing outlaws. A detective later asserted that he had managed to trace the duo to the border region. There, he purportedly discovered that John Jr. had succumbed to apoplexy. The elder Benders, however, continued their journey uninterrupted. Instead of disembarking at Humboldt, they proceeded northward to Kansas City, where it is believed they secured tickets for St. Louis, Missouri. Several vigilante factions rallied to search for the Benders. Various narratives emerged regarding their capture and demise. One rendition claims a vigilante group apprehended the Benders, executing all but Kate, who was said to have been burned alive. An alternative account states that another group lynched the Benders before disposing of their bodies in the Verdigris River. Yet another version recounts a fatal gunfight, followed by the burial of the Benders' remains on the prairie. Strangely, no individual ever claimed the $3,000 reward that had been offered. News of the Benders' escape spread, and the quest to locate them persisted sporadically for half a century. Often, pairs of women traveling together were mistaken for Kate Bender and her mother. In 1884, reports surfaced of a man named John Flickinger committing suicide in Lake Michigan. Similarly, in that year, an elderly man fitting John Bender Sr.'s description was arrested in Montana for a murder near Salmon, Idaho. The victim had suffered a fatal blow to the head from a hammer. A message seeking confirmation was sent to Cherryvale, but the suspect mutilated his foot to evade his shackles and bled to death. By the time a deputy from Cherryvale arrived, the body had decomposed to a point where identification was unfeasible. The man's skull was displayed as pawbenders in a salmon saloon until Prohibition led to its closure in 1920 and the skull vanished. Whether John Flickinger was indeed John Bender remains an unresolved question.